Good evening, dear learners. Today we are going to start with feminist theories. All right. Um, we shall see how how gender, sex, and politics. They are intertwined in the this contemporary theory of feminism. Okay, and then we'll move on to some feminist theories. And then I'll first of all I'll explain what is this feminism, and in which areas of studies is this applicable. First we are going to do that, and then we'll move on to some feminist theories. Now to start with, I think in my initial classes, we have given a we have done a slight discussion on this, a very precise discussion on feminism, and we had discussed that these this kind of what we shall say feminist rising came during the 20th century. Okay, when females, especially females from the west, they stood up for their rights. Okay, because this is mainly a western theory, that got initiated in the west, and then sweep came all over the world, including third world countries like India as well. Now, when this woman, they started to talk about themselves, they started to talk about their rights, because initially, when after this French Revolution and all, the system of voting, election came up in Europe. Okay, when Europe became a democratic country, nations. At that time, voting system, election started, but initially, only male members of the society, they were allowed to vote. Okay, whereas women had no right to enjoy the suffrage. Okay, the adult suffrage, only male, because it was thought in those days that only men were intellectually capable of deciding political affairs. Women were not intelligent enough to decide political things. But gradually, women got themselves educated, and they understood that they were subjugated. They were pulled back by the male counterpart as far as claiming themselves in the society is concerned, and claiming about the intellectuality is concerned. So they protested for their rights, and finally they got the right to vote. Now, Learners, just give me 1 minute. I'll be back. There's a lot of disturbance around me. Just hold on. Yeah, I'm back. So this was the first wave of feminism that first started in European country. Okay, so out of a lot of outrage and protest and resistance, women got the opportunity to vote. So that is how feminism took its roots, especially in Europe. Okay, now again after that there was a second wave of feminism that came up where females wanted more claims, all right, in terms of their safety, in terms of equality in many other phases of life. So again they protested that they were some you know uh, uh, they were not getting equal treatment in the society. So again they protested, and that came from with that came the third wave of feminism. And with fourth wave, it spread to different third world countries also, when we came to know that European conditions, white women's conditions are different from colored people's or black people's female conditions. So now third world country women from third world country also, they started to question about their rights, because apart from other things, especially in India, you see that there are different levels of subjugation of women. Okay, such as domestic violence also women have to face. So there were dowry cases, deaths due to dowry were happening. And then at one point of time there was sati pratha was followed. So female also stood up in third world countries like India to claim their positions, and which was duly heard by the government, by the people, okay, of our nation. And to a large extent, all the outdated traditions were removed from the society. And today you can see women and men, they are working hand in hand in every sphere of life. Okay, so this is how women, especially, they stood up for themselves from time to time. And this is how they claimed their position, and they helped other women also to live with dignity. Okay, so firstly, we see the first wave of feminism in Europe came in the 1920s. Okay, in Britain, where votes for women was duly addressed. Okay, the campaign for parliamentary seats for women in India also, uh, we got in the 1990s. So all this happened, due to lots of feminists who stood up for the rights of women. Okay, so feminist doesn't only mean that only females, but there were men also who were working hand in hand to give women their due rights. Okay, so feminist theories seem to go a little bit, little bit passive from time to time, or sometimes, if these feminist theories, they became very much domestic issues at a point of time. Okay, so this kind of theory, unlike other theories, it went into the private spaces of individuals. Okay, so you can see that feminism is in itself a comment on the way in which women have been silenced. It shows how women were marginalized at all times and in all places. Okay, so irrespective of your location, east or west, wherever you belong, till certain point of time, women were marginalized. Women, the voices were silent. Okay, silenced. So if you look at literature, when we see literature, uh, and the production by both women and men, again you will find certain disturbing facts. Okay, in our literature also. Mm. And when men are writing, you can see that they take themselves to the center stage, and they keep the woman at the periphery. Okay, when male centric novels and books are written, if you see women's writing, women were it was very natural for them initially, not later on, initially, to give men good space in the novel. Okay, so you can say that that was an unknowingly, they fell into certain gender based biases. Okay, so feminist theories are trying to identify such kind of biases. They are trying to negotiate them by sensitizing the readers to their existence, and they are trying to organize strategy to resist against such biases. So theories, they are trying to point out this kind of biases. Okay, they are trying to sensitize the readers in order to understand this kind of biases, and they insist upon people in order to resist to such kind of biases and differences. So in literature, if you find certain plots are there where the man and the woman, they are in adversarial relationship in terms of ideas. Okay, you will find that, okay, the ideas are not matching, but there is no hostility. Okay, so this context of friendship help advance the feminist argument through means of friendly persuasion, or it gives the scope for the argument, in order to go for certain limits of radicalism also. Okay. Now, before we go into the different aspects of this feminist studies, let me first tell you what is the difference between gender and sex. Sometimes we mix it, or we just use it as a synonym, but they are not usually synonym. You must remember, sex is a biological term. Okay, it is a biological aspect, whereas gender is a social term. Okay, gender stereotypes means only certain genders are allowed to do certain kind of work. Like for example, women, okay, they have to take care of the kitchen. They are bound to do the household tasks. They are bound to take care of the kids. Okay, whereas male, that male stereotype is go out to work, earn money, get back. So actually, sex is determined by biology, but gender is determined by society. You have certain gender roles, but you can see the difference, this which the feminist theories have brought about a clear vision of, or the clear difference between sex and gender. Sex can't be interchanged, means male cannot behave biologically like a female, and female cannot behave biologically like a male. They have their strict rules, they cannot exchange. Like biologically a female is supposed to give birth to the young ones biologically, whereas male sex, they cannot uh, reproduce directly. Okay, so sexual role is very rigid, you can't change, because that is biological, that is given to us by nature. But gender roles can be interchanged. Okay, and this idea was actually very redundant earlier, but feminist theories, uh, they claimed for this kind of interchangeability of gender roles. Like for example, if I'm a female, then I'm supposed to stay at home according to the societal gender norms, societal gender stereotypical norms. I'm supposed to stay at home. I'm supposed to do all the household chores. I'm supposed to take care of my kids. Okay, this is what the society expects of me. Whereas if I have a husband, his role is to go out of the house, work hard, okay, earn money, and provide for the family. So this is what is decided by society, not by nature. Okay, not by any biological biological aspects. This is decided by gender stereotypes. So now feminist theory said that why this can't be fixed, you can change. Okay, it is possible that being a female, I can go out and work, I can bring a living livelihood, or I can win bread for my family members. All right. And it is also possible that my husband, being a male, he can stay at home. He can take care of domestic chores. Okay. He can help raise the kids. So that is possible. You can switch roles. That is possible. Okay. In terms of gender stereotypes, you can switch roles. Okay. Or both of you can do both the things. It is possible. Okay, Being a spouse, both of you can go out, you earn, okay, you bring, you win bread for your family, both of you together, and both of you at the same time do household chores. All right, so it is not fixed according to the gender roles, and this is what was pointed out by feminists. They said that no, this is not just the fundamental principle that I have to follow this rule. No, we can interchange. And if you expect me only to stay at home, okay, only to take care of the domestic chores, not to go out, not to earn, then that is, you are, violating my rights. I too have equal right. Okay, and same thing for the male also. If he wishes to stay, if he wishes to be a homemaker, that is okay. All right, you cannot impose anything in terms of gender stereotypes. So you can see that although it is very private, it is about our private lives. Okay, but still there are certain political perceptions based on our two fundamental principles. Okay, and what are they? That first principle, fundamental principle is that gender difference is the foundation of a structural inequality between women and men. This is what was pointed out by feminists, that gender difference is the foundation of structural inequality between men and women. Okay, in that case, women suffer systematic social injustice. Okay, so this difference, when you're talking about that he can do so many things, she can't do such things, then that is a kind of social injustice imposed upon women. Okay, and second fundamental principle is that inequality between the two sexes is not the result of biological necessity. That's what I told you. Biologically, nobody is unequal, both of them are equal, but is produced by the cultural construction of gender differences. Our culture is constructed in such a way that it demarcates a woman from a man. Okay, it is trying to create the differences and inequalities among men and women. What? Our cultural construction. Nature doesn't give anything, has not given anything unequally. Okay, so to understand the social and psychic mechanism, okay, that construct and that perpetuate gender inequality, and then it tries to change them. So actually, the culture, our cultural construction is such that it creates a certain kind of inequality that affects our psychic mind. Okay, and then and this feminist came up, they talked in order to change such kind of injustices. Equal rights should be given to all, to everybody, irrespective of male or female. So in that case, you see that sex, if you talk about sex, it refers to determining identity. Okay, who you are, a male or a female, in terms of sexuality. Okay, so sex here refers to how you are determining the identity on the biological basis. All right, this is what is sex. While gender means cultural meaning attached to sexual identity. That is what I had explained to you. So the cultural meaning that is attached to sexual identity, that is gender. Okay, so gender is the product of culture, the way culture, not culture but culture conditioning. All right, so woman may be stereotyped as being womanly qualities. Okay, with which restricts them to certain certain limited roles. Okay, so you are womanly. Okay, so you are supposed to do certain restricted roles. Out of this much of limitations, you can't go beyond. So the society, the culture fixes norms for us. Okay, and that is what, according to feminist, is injustice towards female gender. Okay, now what are the main issues raised by the feminist theories that we are going to discuss now. When we are studying feminist theories, or whenever we are teaching it also in the class, okay, it is usually a cultural practice that is organized, that is completely properly laid down by our academy itself. Okay, our academy has laid down proper cultural practice for us. It has organized in a very organized way. Our academy has set down certain cultural practices for us, which is related to feminist theories. Okay, so actually it is the academy now presently which controls reading. Okay, through fixing us the syllabus for us. So the syllabus that you see, actually it reflects the canon, what kind of canonical study is done, that you can see through the syllabus. Okay, and you can, in your syllabus you can find that which books are valuable to be read. I'm talking about literature. So which books are valuable you can find with the help of syllabus only. Okay, so this canon actually that we can understand through syllabuses, it actually confirms the cultural biases of those who make it. Okay, the syllabus makers, what kind of cultural biases do they have, uh, uh, that is understood through these academic highlights. Okay, so you can see that canons are very much implicit to power. So canons are useful that they help us to handle, so they help in managing certain historical aspects. So that is why we say that canon is very much important. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that certain things are controlled by certain people, and those people, uh, if they control certain aspect of our society or of our academia, okay, then their point of view is also suggested through whatever they are trying to highlight. Okay, so earlier when these canons were set, they were very much male centric. Okay, male only, men only, they decided what to studied, what to be taken as canonical and what to be taken as non-canonical. But gradually with the coming, uh, leaving the domestic space and coming out and speaking of some women, some female authors, of some female critics, now things have changed. Okay, and from certain redundant uh, canons, now we have moved on, and we are finding equality even in our academic prospects in terms of gender biases. Okay, uh, now initially, traditionally, women, they have used short story. When literature began, when women began writing, they usually experimented with short story writing. Okay, why? Because it requires a brief idea that they were putting down. Okay, and they used to write short stories because they got very brief time from their daily household chores, and in that brief absence from work, they utilized in writing short stories initially. Okay, so women started writing, but it was relatively less formal. Okay, or it was neither classical or educational. Okay, which you can refer in your education. No, just in order to get some break from the daily chores, they used to write. And as the breaks were very short, they used to write short stories. Okay. So till lot of time, you can see that there were not many, or at least at some point of time there was nothing. Okay, there was nothing that came from the woman side. So men were always ahead in terms of literary practices. Okay, and in this way you can find, in literature also you can find how uh, patriarchal domination confirmed, got itself claimed and confirmed in literature, where when women's writing was very few in comparison to male writing. Okay, few were almost nil at some point of time. It was absolutely nil. So this showed how patriarchal writings they dominated over literature. Okay, now the women were completely found absent. So we will see how romantic writers like Wordsworth. At the same time, there was a famous writer called Mary Wollstonecraft, a lady who is one of those who was, who was a feminist theorist, very initial feminist theories, and how she was brought to the forefront. Okay, how Wollstonecraft, along with different other male writers, she got, she was a canonical writer who was acclaimed for feminist theories. How gradually she came to the notice in the academy, that you shall see how her, you know, um, coming to the front line helped other feminists to come up and speak for themselves. So feminist theories, they try to take over the canon, and they try to rescue that from patriarchy by helping readers see the text. They tried certain genres or movements so as to make visible the components of gender biases in the academy. Okay, so many feminist theories they came up, followed by Mary Wollstonecraft, and they try to show try to awake the society in terms of how patriarchy ruled the literary world, whereas woman patriarchy means male centered writing, how it dominated the literary arena, whereas how females were put behind. So these women, they they claimed for a rereading of the text. Okay, and not only this, they claimed that women should have their own body of writing. They should write for themselves. Why should somebody else write for themselves? Them, they are going to write for themselves. Okay, so this is how they claim their position in the society. So you can see few very good writers that started from Victorian poet, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Okay, she was Robert Browning's wife, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She was a very famous Victorian poet. Okay, you can, in a way, you can say that she was also a feminist, a female. That will come gradually from a female. She once said that England has had many learned women, and yet where are the poetesses? So she said that no doubt England has got too many educated women, but there are no poetesses. Why? Okay. I look everywhere for grandmothers and see none. So she says that I want to see my predecessors, poets like me, but there is no one. Another poet came called Emily Dickinson. So she also, painfully talked about the similar problem in United States. Okay, she comes from United States. In 1862, she says the something same like Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She says that they shut me up in prose as when a little girl, they put me in the closet because they liked me still. Okay, so she says that they mean the whole society, the patriarchal society. Okay, and although they liked me, they accepted me, but they did not want me to have a voice of my own. Okay, so these are the problems which we see in our literary ancestry. There were the problems, and then many people, many women came, many feminist theories came who addressed these problems, who showed to the world that how women are suffering. Maybe the women who are having good poetic quality, maybe they are having good novel writing ability, but they are not given scope to write. Okay, when they write initially, they like Bronte sisters, they used to hide their names. Okay, when they wrote, they did not write their names, they used to hide their names. They kept pen names and then they used to write. Okay, so they had a fear of being criticized and not accepted. So society was so patriarchal at that time. All right. So slowly, slowly, these feminist theories they addressed all these deprived issues of women, and then they helped women achieve equal rights. Okay, which is why today women are enjoying their liberty, their freedom to write whatever is their standpoint. So if you see feminist criticism, if you are trying to study, okay, so it is just like any other form of literary theory. All right, and it relates across critical boundaries. There are many critics, many writers like Simon de Beauvoir. Okay, she also claimed she was a feminist critic and author. Simon de Beauvoir, she always claimed for, uh, you know, uh, sh- she took a very much Marxist standpoint, and she was primarily interested in a class-based analysis, which treated women as a class among the oppressed. Okay, so she took a Marxist standpoint, and she said that if you are trying to study gender, study it in terms of class. If you study this gender differences in terms of class, you will find that the most deprived class, the most oppressed class are women all over the world. Okay, so all over the world, our condition is same. We are the same. Another writer, another critic called Edward Said, okay, he had written a very famous theory called Orientalism. Okay, he gives one example, and he takes out example from feminist theories, and he talks about the difficult relationship of females in the society that comprises of the major bulk of feminist theory. Okay, so many theories came one after another. They claimed their point of view. Okay, like there was another critic called Ejaz Ahmad. He also took this whole idea as a Marxist theory. Okay, and he also talked about focusing a certain class of the society which is very oppressed. So these feminist theories, they cannot only develop one ethic of suffering, they reshape the academy and the world. In academia there was no space for women's writing. Okay, but gradually we see not only women's writing is included, but these feminist theories and theories have also got good space in our academia, for which we are discussing today. Okay, now we will discuss next about Mary Wollstonecraft and her writing called A Vindication of the Rights of Women. We shall see what she says and what's her stand, and how she is a spokesperson for all the women in the world. Okay, and how this a vindication of the rights of women is just an entry point of discussion of feminist texts. This is the initial writing on the discussion of feminist text. Okay, and also we will see how this relationship between individualism, feminism, and socialism exists. How these writers, how these critics have addressed to the issues of individualism, feminism, and socialism. So, if I introduce Mary Wollstonecraft, then she was born in 1759 and she died in 1797. And she belonged to a circle of intellectuals in London. Now, this intellectual circle, it was very active in supporting revolutionary ideas. Okay, this circle was very active in supporting new and revolutionary ideas, and this group was led by a person called Richard Price. Richard Price was born in 1723 and he died in 1791. So this whole intellectual group, it upheld the idea of upheld the idea of American colonies from British rule in 1775, and it also supported the ideals of French Revolution that took place in 1789 that we were discussing in our previous classes. So this group supported the ideals of French Revolution as well. All right. So this intellectual group was greatly influenced by the idealists of 17th century English philosopher, particularly John Locke. Okay, so they were very much impressed by John Locke's ideas, idealist ideas of 17th century. He was a philosopher. Okay. Now, what Locke had said that these people got so much of influenced by his theories, by his philosophies. John Locke actually had spoken a lot about individualism. Okay, he had said that individuals are born free. These individuals, they are subject to reason, they are subject to the law of moral behavior. So although they are born free, but yet they have to have certain ability to reasoning, and also they should have the law of moral behavior. So in although they are born free, but their freedom is restricted because of certain laws of moral behavior. They have to behave morally, that is most important, and this was the philosophy of Locke. Okay. Now this legacy set by Locke was very much, was very much accepted by these intellectual groups, and this idea, Locke's idea, actually it crafted Wollstonecraft's ideas, and that made her work such effective that till now it is taken very uh, valuable piece of criticism. Okay. So her first publication was on the same subject to which she would return in Vindication. So she talks about her initial publication, talks about the education of women, and also you will see that when she's writing Vindication, you will find that same idea of education of women is important. Okay. So her first work was titled as Thoughts on the Education of Daughters. Okay. Thoughts on the Education of Daughters, that was published in 1787. And then this work was followed by A Vindication of the Rights of Man. It was published in 1790. Okay, 1790. Now, in this work, Vindication of the Rights of Man, she actually supports the cause of French Revolution. She says that French Revolution had a real, authentic cause for which people stood together. They fought for their rights. Okay. So the text with which we are concerned about Wollstonecraft uh, is Vindication on the Rights of Women that came later. But before that, let me tell you that Wollstonecraft actually married William Goodwin. So who is William Goodwin? He is also a revolutionary thinker. Okay. And she got married in 1797. So after 2 years of her marriage, she got lots of cooperation and help from her husband, William Goodwin. And then she wrote some very important books. So important books were written about that give the account of Mary Wollstonecraft and her circle, her whole circle. So these whole thinkers may be called as the radical heirs of Locke. What Locke had initiated, his idea was advanced by this intellectual group. So Locke in those days he had argued a lot about you know full equality of civil and political rights. He talked about abolition of aristocratic privileges. Okay. He talked about equality of opportunity. Okay. He talked about that equality should be given in in terms of careers, who are open to talents. Whatever talent you have, you can opt for your career. Okay. And he talked about middle class Democrats, with all the individualist social and political theories that they had, they should be given some some privilege. So, the way in which this radicalism of Wollstonecraft and her group was tempered by Locke's commitment to reason and natural belief, you will notice that a claim is being made for equality of opportunity based on equality of value. Okay. So, the logic here says that all people, regardless of class, regardless of gender, they are all equally open to reason. Earlier what it was says that women have got no power of reasoning, but this group, whole intellectual group of Mary Wollstonecraft, it talked about equality. Okay, equality open to reason, and that is why all should have equal right to be treated rationally. All of the citizens, okay, of Britain at that time, only it was Britain, women came from Britain, all of them should be treated with respect and rationality. Then they spoke about uh, the equation which was being worked out between individual happiness and good of society. So that equation should be maintained between individual happiness and the good of society. Then they claimed that the way in which the class specific nature of Wollstonecraft and her friends might have reduced their radicalism. This was actually a criticism that you will see in many of the discussion of Wollstonecraft. Okay, and we are going to discuss that in detail about what Wollstonecraft says about in her writing. That we shall see. Now, Wollstonecraft discusses about the dual nature of vindication. Okay, and vindication is immediately apparent. Okay, in the formation of the literary body by Wollstonecraft. So, by definition, um, this contemporary position of women and the lack of education. Actually, it points out the criticism points out the contemporary means of that time position of women and the lack of education. So, in that book, it was written that it is largely men who comprise the circle to which vindication is designed to appeal. So, after all, it is men only. Okay, and it is very bitter irony that it is only men who have to be uh, rationally persuaded in order to grant women the rights. It is men only who have to give the rights to women. Okay, otherwise women do not have the free right. No, that right has to be given by men. So that was a very sorry state of condition that Mary Wollstonecraft pointed out of that contemporary time. Okay, and that text, that book is dedicated of Wollstonecraft. It is dedicated to Bishop Talleyrand of France. Okay, and his work on education and on civil liberties, Wollstonecraft had great respect. So, in honor of that bishop, she had dedicated her book to him. So, actually, she writes to persuade him and other like minded people that when men try for their freedom, when men fight for their freedom and they demand to be allowed to judge for themselves, respecting their own freedom, and they demand to be allowed to judge for themselves, respecting their own happiness. Okay, it is very inconsistent and unjust to subjugate women. So, when men demand for justice and they want justice for themselves, and they say that they can judge things for themselves. So, what about women? Okay, why women in the same context? Why they are subjugated? Why why injustice is done to them? Why can't women have their own sense of judgment? It was not given. Okay, so even though you firmly believe that you are acting in the best calculated way
to promote women's happiness. So why can't women have their own happiness? Who are men? This is what Mary Wollstonecraft is questioning. Who are men to give happiness to women? Why can't women have that happiness, have their own sense of judgment for themselves? Okay, why they should be granted the right? Okay, right is for everybody, but men allow the right and women accept the right. Why so? Right is right. Right is equal for all. Right is your claim. Okay, so again, you're being allowed to have your own claim. So this is the irony that Wollstonecraft is pointing out. So Wollstonecraft's text is actually addressing to women that that concerns their rights to education, particularly. Okay, so she says that women should be given equal right to education. Men get all opportunities, all first-hand privileges, but women are not given that. Okay, and if at all they are given, then it is said that men are allowing women to do that. So who are men to allow? Okay, when right is equal for all, so why there is kind of leadership on the part of men? Okay, so I'm quoting whatever she says, very, very moving lines. She says, I earnestly wish to point out in what true dignity and happiness consists. I wish to persuade women to endeavor to acquire strength, both of mind and body, and to show that elegance is inferior to virtue, that the first object of laudable ambition is to obtain a character as a human being, regardless of the distinction of sex. So she is asking all the women of that time to build a character, okay, to make a stand for themselves, to create for themselves true dignity. Okay, true happiness you have to create for yourself. Okay, of and both of mind and body you have to acquire that strength. You cannot remain weak. Another, actually, what was happening in Victorian period, if you have read Pride and Prejudice, if you have read Persuasion, okay, then you must have seen that women actually they were looked upon as just an object of sex. Okay, beautifully dressed, elegantly, clothed, and looking beautiful was the as if was it the only task of the woman. And if you see those novels, you will find that women are struggling to marry to some high class people. Okay, so as if there is no sustenance to be or to marry a person with low class or a middle class. They are struggling hard to go to high class societies. Okay, so that was actually a question, a critique on the condition of women, that how they were just treated as an object of sex. That's all. Okay, and they had no other use. Okay, as if they only had that bodily and physical beauty and they had no virtue. So people like Mary Wollstonecraft, they are encouraging women to come out from that redundant ideas of a female sexuality. They have to come out and they have to claim for themselves. They have to become strong enough to show that they are also equally virtuous and intelligent. They are mindful. Okay, so if at that time, Wollstonecraft's work was a sudden attack on the society. So how do you think people took that? How do you think women read that kind of book? Okay, uh, so actually, women, firstly there was a little unrest what Wollstonecraft has written, but slowly people understood that yes, women's education is also very much needed. Women also need to gain intellectual knowledges. Okay, and maybe both the genders they're equal, and in equal in terms of intellectuality, equal in terms of obtaining rights. Okay, so if you see chapter 6 of her book, you will find that from its title, which states that an idea, there's an idea in the whole text. So consequently, Wollstonecraft, she's talking about education. in the whole of her writing, just like the title itself. She's saying that education is integral to the development of individual identity. In order to develop yourselves, your individual identity, you need to get proper education. All right. So that your dependence of the mind, okay, won't be there. You won't be mindfully dependent on anybody. And uh, for that, you need rigorous discipline. You need to get a very disciplined education. Okay. You have to educate your mind. All right. And you have to come out of anything that is slavish. Woman should not behave in a in the way of slaves. That slavish attitude which was coming down from centuries, that has to be stopped. Okay. So this need for education of women was even more compelling, okay, than men. Okay, the need for that education by women was more needed than men. So according to her, women do not have that easy access to career. According to Wollstonecraft, during those days, women did not have that. See, European women. So what would you say about India or third world countries? Okay, so in those days, women did not have proper access to education, or further moving ahead, they did not have proper access to career or to do business that men used to do. Okay, and therefore these women were more bound in an irrational way to certain restricted impressions. Okay, because women were usually untutored, most of the women were untutored, and their minds were also untutored. They had no disciplinary ideas. Okay, so actually they existed in during those days in a state of ignorance. They were slavish. They were dependent on external circumstances. They were dependent on their associates like their father or husband. Okay, so, in those days, these women were not able to see the world in the clear light of reason. They had no light of reason. Women were, you know, pushed to the darkness of bondage, and they were far off from external reality during those days. So, when women were young and they needed to be rationally educated, they were taught superficial things. Okay, like playing the piano. Okay, uh, many such making intricate embroideries. They were not given proper rational education, and they were given all this sort of superficial education just to please their future husband. Okay, in order to please the future husband, they were given certain superfluous education. Okay, which was not needed at all by the society. Okay, and then you say that when these women they became adults and when they matured, they felt themselves completely useless. They just had to take care of the children. Okay, and they did not have proper hold also on themselves, on their lives, or on their children's lives. So everything was controlled by their husbands. So this was the dire condition of women that Wollstonecraft shows in her opening pages of chapter 6. And she heavily relies on the uh, you know on the importance of reason. She says that be reasonable. Okay, so she gives a clarion call to women to be reasonable, and she again and again says that reason is an integral part of nature. Okay, so all human beings should first of all be very reasonable. And she talks about about the psychology of women of that time. Okay, and whereas she says that when there was revolution and when this women's rights were being claimed, so that psychology which was coming down from ages and ages of that of slavery, being slavish to their husbands, now she is talking about getting some reason in order to be your individual self. So Wollstonecraft here is building a groundwork. Okay, she's doing the groundwork, and she takes certain literature also as her to in order to take a data, to take example, she is taking few example of literature as well. Then there is a next text by Virginia Woolf. Again, this is a feminist text, and the name of the text is "A Rooms of One's Own." Okay, where Virginia Woolf again talks about a separate identity that a woman should build, and that is why she gives the name of a book as "A Room of One's Own." So, in this book, Virginia Woolf is extending her debate on the education of women. Okay, which was initially started by Mary Wollstonecraft. Virginia Woolf is continuing with the same debate that Wollstonecraft had introduced. Okay, and she gives some fresh issues on the development of women as writers. Okay, that is what she's telling. So, Virginia Woolf was born in 1882 in okay, and she was one of the editors of Dictionary of National Biography. All right. So Woolf had a lot of writing of her own. She has started writing from her childhood itself, and she largely focuses on abuse and ill treatment. And when she became adult, she spent largely most of her time with her friends of the Bloomsbury group. There was a group, okay, where Virginia Woolf also had an intellectual group. That group's name was Bloomsbury Group, and that was London's very selected intellectuals, painters, writers, and critics. They comprised this Bloomsbury Group. Okay, so the group included people from different backgrounds. There were economists such as George Maynard Keynes. Okay, there was a biographer called Lytton Strachey. The novelist E.M. Foster also was in that Bloomsbury group. Okay, so like Mary Wollstonecraft, she was very much associated with a group, and she was very much inspired by the group's intellectuality. Similar way, I am Virginia Woolf also had a lot of impression and influence from her group, because you can know that E.M. Foster mainly was a huge novelist, was a very popular novelist of the time. Okay, so what happened here, that Woolf was also very radical. Okay, people actually her readers find her very radical, and what was important, what was impressed, her friends, her peers were impressed by her, because she was very much like her age, because the time, the age was revolutionary. So she was also one of the revolutionaries, where she was criticized, and you know there was a comment on her. It was said that the weapons they turned on the Victorians were forged in Victorian houses. So actually, this shows the revolutionary ideas of the Victorians of the time, and this shows that how Woolf, Virginia Woolf, stayed stuck to her career and stayed stuck to her perspective. Okay, she was the one who helped shape modernism in England, both as a critic and as a novelist. Okay, remember this. It was Virginia Woolf who shaped modernism in England, one of the shapers of modernism in England. Okay, both as a critic and as a novelist. So, one of her best known essays are Mr. Bennet and Mrs. Brown. This was published in 1924. Then you can, I think you must have read this in your UG classes also. Her best novels were Mrs. Dalloway. This was published in 1925. To the Lighthouse is also very popular. It was published in 1927. And The Waves was published in 1931. So, among many writings, these were very popular novels. So, not only that, Woolf was very famous for her critical approach to feminism as well. Now, I would stop here, learners. I would continue next class with these feminist ideas, and we'll move on to different other theories in our coming classes. So, till then, I'm taking your leave for today. We'll meet next class. Goodbye. Goodbye to all.